Now, one of the big leaps in scientific knowledge in the 1400s and 1500s was the increasing control of time in European nations. And when I say that, I mean a whole series of different ways that Europe became more and more precise about the temporal sphere in which we live. So, for one thing, mechanical clocks are invented and built all over Italy in the 1300s and then everywhere else afterwards. Why is a mechanical clock important? Because all of the societies and all of the activities were now able to be controlled by the time of day. I will meet you at 12 o'clock. There's the clock in the middle of the piazza, and so you know it's 12 o'clock. But then the next steps would be individual clocks in homes, and of course, finally, wristwatches. All of these steps meant that those people who were doing any kind of scientific research could indicate exactly when and where the research results were being recorded. And that was absolutely essential. For any kind of scientific progress, you had to be able to know times, dates, and you needed to be able to keep a record. So that almost every scientific experiment ever done records time of day, place, time it started, time it ended, how many minutes, how many hours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of that became possible as European society developed more and more precise control of time. So these little facts that I present to you in the next few minutes is all a key to that moment when, around 1600, the great breakthrough scientists, Francis Bacon in England, Descartes in France, could now use the precision of modern timekeeping. The first step in our understanding of time in this entire story we just told, we're going to tell it again, but only from one point of view. And now, the important point in this story is, how do we learn to measure time so that science can proceed? Keep it in mind, the minute you think about it, you realize modern science cannot proceed in the absence of accurate time measurement. Everything in science relies. And no such measurement exists in time of Jesus, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Reformation. No such device exists. All right, so let's proceed. So we all know what we're interested in now, science and time. And we know that the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians, Babylonians, achieve a calendar. They have to debate, should it be solar or lunar? The choice is solar. And so by the Middle Ages, they have a Egyptian calendar. And just keep in mind, everybody doesn't have a calendar, a shared calendar, until the Christian era. In ancient Greece, every city-state had its own calendar. Now, in the Middle Ages, you need a universal agreement on time, and it all starts in monasteries, worshiping with the ringing of the bells. Here's Vallombrosa. They have a great bell tower. Here's in Bologna, in 800, 900, 1000. You're in cities, and in cities you get churches. Every single city from, Christianity 200-300 AD. You have bells, and you have daily worship multiple times a day. How do you mark the worship? You ring the bell. So you have bells ringing all day, marking first bell in the morning, second bell at this, second bell, and the city itself lives around the bell tower. You have bell towers here in this picture. The most famous bell tower of all, the Tower of Pisa, Leaning Tower of Pisa, is a bell tower. There are bells up there at the top. That was the whole point of it. It's right next to the church. And it was ringing the bells to call people to worship. So that's the beginning of having a universal marking of the hour of the day. In Florence, you had the Badia, right across the street from Dante's house, where the bell rang. The word for bell was clock. The word clock comes from a Dutch word clock, which is cognate with Glock in German, Glockenspiel, you know. And so the very word, our word clock, comes from the word for bell. In other words, we, as we accept the clock to govern the times of our day, are really rooted in the worshiping bell of the churches. It was the bell that announced the Mass, and now it's going to be the clock that will announce it. And if we go to Venice, and we look over there at Piazza San Marco, and we go into the piazza, everyone here knows that there's a bell tower, and then there's a city clock tower. And that clock tower right over there, the Venetian clock tower, under the arch to the most important mercantile street of the city, is the recognition that at the moment of this bell tower moving out of the bell tower and into a clock tower, the 1350s, so the period right after Dante, is the secularization of time. In other words, you move the control of the equal hours out of the hands of the bell tower, which is the church and the worship, and you move it into the hands of the merchants. So there you have, roughly 1350, 60, 70, 80, Francesco Petrarca, Boccaccio, both of their families were merchants. You move all of society out of the hands of the bell and the church and the priest over to the hands of the merchants, and the bells that in each city now will ring off the daily hours by the clock. And in the 1300s, 1350, we have the great clock tower race all over Italy and then all over Europe. From 1350 to 1400, there breaks out the great clock tower race, where every single city wants the tallest clock tower of anybody in Europe. And so after the Italian city-states, 1360, 70, 80, Florence, Siena, Venice, all these cities get their big towers. They hire the Italian clock tower makers to come to Paris and London, and everybody in the world is getting a clock tower. And they want it higher and higher until finally they build one that's so tall that it falls over. And so then that's the end of the clock tower race. Everybody accepts a reasonable size. Here, all these clock towers are in Italy, one in Lucca, one in sweet little Cadore, the home of Titian, and of course the Venice one. So if we look at this sky view of Florence, you are seeing the move from the cathedral, and this would be after the dome, but we're talking before the dome. So from the cathedral over to the city hall. Here's the city hall in this right side here. And on the city hall facade, you see the clock tower. And that movement of the 14th century is the summary of the move from the power of the church to the power of the merchants. And the merchants are going to control that palazzo there. That's the government palazzo. Dante is one of them, and they're going to control that the city and the city politics and the city palace, and they pay for the clock tower. So that in this moment, think of this, everybody. This is the most fascinating thing of this whole evening. Here is born the equal hour. With the imposition of the mechanical clock, because that's a mechanical clock up there. That's not a bell. That's mechanics. That's a machine. And with the birth of the mechanical clock, which is the 14th century, you get the birth of the equal hour. All these clocks were created and built to keep the hours. And to display the hours, those are hour hands. The second hand only comes later. And most of these clocks on most of these towers, in these Italian city towers that have maintained their original historical look, they only tell you the hour. But the important thing for us is the birth of the equal hour. Clocks are the beginning of the mechanical age. Clocks are the first real machines in Western civilization. The clock is the mother of all other machines. Think of that. This blows my mind. I agree. It blows mine too. It blows mine too, because it's just phenomenally important. It's just this incredible moment in the mid 14th century when all of a sudden all these societies, all these cities, all these states all agree to put up clocks. Just think of that. Everybody, city after city after city, state after state after state, are putting up clocks at the same time. And everybody is now agreeing, I'll meet you at 2. I'll meet you in front of the palace at 2. Ci vediamo al palazzo a 2. Yeah. Everybody is now turning their lives over to a machine, the mother of all machines. Clockmakers become the first scientific instrument makers. Clockmakers become the pioneer scientific instrument makers. Clocks require first real degree of precision in machine making. So one of the great revolutions in all of human history, the movement from the variable hour, the sun hour, to mechanical hour, the equal hour. Human-controlled hour, that is, a human invention. So the clock itself, the thing we're talking about, 1350, is the beginning of the mechanical age. The beginning. Just the beginning. But look at all those other things. Locomotives, computers, engines in cars. All of that is the beginning of the mechanical age. So you can say, in general, the mechanical age parallels exactly the age of modern science. They have to go together. So we get a revolution in time. We have new mechanical clocks, which are better than sand clocks, better than water clocks. All of them don't work for very long. And the mechanical clock now creates the equal hour, the universally equal hour. And the equal hour is absolutely essential to science, because you must document your experiment. You must document when it took place, where it took place, how long did it take, how much time passed, what was the date, what was the week, what was the month, and what was the year. When you publish your paper, you have to tell the people who are reading your paper in New Delhi, when did you do it, how long did you bake it in the sun, how long did you do this, how long did you do that, on what date. That's what every scientific paper does. So this preparation we've just been studying is absolutely essential for modern science. And modern science is roughly 1600. So by 1600, think of this, London and Geneva are the two great international centers of precision clocks. There you go. There's your clue to the entire modern age. London, Geneva, and of course Amsterdam too, but for clocks and pretty soon watches, London and Geneva will be the great centers.